Success of this partnership is first and foremost going to be measured in how many customers are we helping lower their bills. That, to me, is the single most significant unit of measurement. To the degree that we can establish that flexibility is the best way, most effective way, fastest way to deal with the affordability crisis, that's going to give us an opportunity to scale massively because we're solving the single most significant problem that consumers have. It's the single biggest concern that often regulators have. And if it's a consumer problem, and it's a regulator problem, it is a utility problem.
I think you pointed out something that is quite interesting in terms of what I would maybe chalk up to a cultural difference, also like a systemic difference with the way that utilities function in the US being a monopoly. They care about their customers, but the customer usually doesn't have a choice.
And so because we link the benefits of flexibility to the units of measurement that people care about, how much money am I paying on my bill, and we make it really easy, and we create a single location, a single experience to connect every device, we reduce massively the friction associated with participation. Contrast that with the typical experience that a utility offers as a result of the regulatory programs that they have been mandated to implement. And I say that because I actually don't think this is a utility program design issue so much as a regulatory design issue.
Welcome back to the Interchange Recharged. Virtual power plants, the idea that millions of home devices could work together to balance the grid, have been slow to scale in the US. Integration is challenging, customer engagement is low, and utilities are still figuring out how to make these programs work operationally. But Octopus Energy has proven a different model is really possible in the UK, where they've built the world's largest residential virtual power plant with participation rates that they say are significantly higher than industry norms. But the UK is a competitive retail market where customers choose their supplier, and in the US, most customers are served by regulated monopolies, where that model doesn't always work. Last week, though, Octopus announced what might be their answer to break into the US market, with Octopus taking a majority stake in Uplight, who's also partnered with Schneider Electric. And this trio would bring together consumer operations expertise, established utility relationships, and grid management technology. And so today, we're unpacking how this partnership works and whether combining three companies can solve scaling challenges that individual efforts have not. Joining me to discuss this is Nick Chaset, CEO of Octopus Energy US. Nick, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Bridget. Thank you for having me.
So Nick, you guys just announced this partnership with Uplight. And before we get into the details, I was wondering if you could give us the headline. What is it that you're trying to accomplish here that Octopus wasn't able to do on its own?
For the last year and a half, Octopus has been exploring a new business line that is required when trying to serve customers in utilities where they don't have the ability to choose their supplier. Over the last decade, Octopus has built a massive global business on the premise that consumers want a better experience. And in markets where they can choose their supplier, we've had great success. But most of the world is not characterized by consumer electricity choice. In most of the world, consumers are served by a single vertically integrated utility. And that is certainly, for the most part, the case here in the United States as well, save Texas. And so while we've operated a retail supplier in Texas for the last handful of years, we wanted to start to think through how do we start to help utilities transform the experience of the consumers they serve. Thus was born our flexibility as a service offering. One of our main lessons, though, in flexibility as a service is it just takes a long time to get through the utility contracting processes. And while we've tried to take an approach that is whole home and holistic based on our experience at Octopus, that is not necessarily aligned well with the regulatory constructs that have been created around demand flexibility. So those two key insights led us to a recognition that to scale our business here in the US, we really wanted to think about partnering with somebody who had an incumbent position, had built capabilities that are aligned to the capabilities that utilities today are looking to buy, but also is looking forward and wanting to think through what does the future offering around consumer flexibility look like. And so through that exploration, we found Uplight, a leading provider of customer engagement and flexibility management software to utilities around the world, but predominantly here in North America. have been working on that for some time now. And so we're really excited to announce the investment that we made public just the beginning of this week.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on the show to talk about that announcement as kind of the first opportunity to discuss it with the market. It sounds like this partnership with Uplight is going to help you cut through the red tape that utility approvals have. Is that right?
Yeah, look, I think Uplight currently serves over 60 different utilities across the country, 8 of the 10 biggest utilities, and is providing a broad suite of services, everything from providing customer energy reports, helping consumers understand how they can save energy, to providing demand response and flexibility management programs where they're actually going out and enrolling devices and giving the opportunity to the utility to manage those devices against peak energy demand, grid constraints. We think there's a massive opportunity to take that strong base that's already been built, apply our consumer centricity, apply our know-how, and expand those offerings significantly, but do so within the context of relationships that already exist, trust that's been established. So we couldn't be more excited to have a great partner to go pursue our expansion here in North America.
I want to touch more on what Uplight does and what that looks like now through this partnership. But for listeners who might not be familiar with Octopus Energy's operations, maybe you can walk us through in more detail what it is that you've been building in the US. Now, you mentioned that you're doing retail operations similarly to how you did it in the UK and Texas. But I know that there's also the Southern California Edison partnership that you have, which is that a good example of the flexibility as a service model? Let's hear more about that.
That's right. So retail electricity in Texas, we seek to delight our customers, give them a level of customer satisfaction and experience that's just best in class, like we do so all over the world. But outside of Texas, we really are limited in our ability to do so by regulation. And so in Southern California, where consumers have very limited opportunities to choose their supplier, we have partnered with Southern California Edison to deploy our Octopus Shift app, which is the consumer app that millions of Octopus customers use every day to do everything from visualize their bill, ask a question about their bill or their service, and also connect their devices to participate in flexibility management programs and offerings. We've localized it to the specific context of Southern California Edison, and then have launched it and have been recruiting customers that have smart thermostats, batteries, and electric vehicles to help them optimize those devices against signals that Southern California Edison provides, and then they earn an incentive or reward for participating in the program. The next phase of the engagement with Southern California Edison is actually going to be continuous optimization, which is this idea that the best way to save customers money on their bill is to ensure that every device is considering the time of use tariff that the customer may be on, and is making small changes in how energy is used throughout the day to save customers $5, $10, $20 a month. And then also create an opportunity, when an event is going to be called, for them to participate and earn incremental rewards. Our core experience with flexibility is that consumers just want lower bills and better comfort. And so everything we do around flexibility, virtual power plants, however we're calling them here, we don't use that term typically. It's all in the context of how can we deliver on those two core promises. And so we're trying to bring that same ethos and those capabilities to bear in Southern California, where we're just dealing with a significant affordability challenge as well. And so that's why I think Southern California has looked at and said, hey, this is a really great opportunity to partner with Octopus.
Okay. And so you mentioned that Uplight has 60 utilities that they're engaging with. I guess before we get into, is this Southern California Edison partnership very similar to what these utilities will be receiving? Where is it that Uplight is most active in the U.S.?
Well, that's what's so exciting about Uplight. There's not a specific region where Uplight has really leaned in, right? It's not, Uplight has a great presence in California or a great presence in New England. They are really serving utilities all over the country, right? They have a really strong presence in the Southeast. They have a really strong presence in the Northeast. Gosh, they also have a really strong presence in the Pacific Northwest and here in California too, and in the Midwest. So they have established an incredible business, partnered with utilities all over the country, providing really critical services to them. And now we feel like we have an opportunity to bring the Octopus brand, the Octopus know-how, and accelerate the work that they're doing.
Well, the Octopus brand is really well known, as we can see from the beautiful pink octopus in your background. Constantine, as I've heard he's called. But also, ever since I followed Octopus Energy on LinkedIn, it's like totally polluting my newsfeed because you have such active engagement. It's something that any customer would want, a really active and proactive customer success base, especially with something so complicated and important as electricity in your home. What does this partnership mean in practice for the 60 different utilities and the customers to which those utilities serve through Uplight? What does it mean to now be tied to Octopus?
So in practice, day one, nothing changes for them, right? Uplight will continue to deliver the great service that they deliver to those utilities and their customers. But once we get through all of the necessary approvals, in the coming months when we're really able to start sticking in, what it's going to mean is more solutions that they can choose from. Be it the Octopus app, great example. We've built the leading consumer app for electricity users in the world with tens of millions of consumers using our app every single day. And we're very excited about using the Uplight channel as a way to expose utilities and their consumers to that app if it's something the utilities are excited about, to really sort of deepen that relationship, deepen that engagement. Another example of where we think there's going to be a great opportunity is so much of the success of Octopus Energy is built on the tech platform Kraken, which is our meter-to-cash billing system.
Fellow cephalopod.
Fellow cephalopod, exactly. There's a theme here, right? Kraken is our meter-to-cash billing system and integrated resource management system. And over the last few years, Kraken actually has demerged from Octopus. And now there are utilities and energy companies around the world who are working with Kraken. Actually, 40 of the biggest energy companies in the world, 75 million meters, are currently operated on Kraken. Many of those are not Octopus meters. Kraken is also in the early days of entering the US market, having contracted to date with National Grid, who they're in the process of implementing with, and having other conversations, of course. But as you can imagine, that's a big IT transformation. It's slow moving, and it's a big decision for a utility to make. And we think this is also an opportunity to help expose big utilities to why operating on Kraken and then working with Octopus and working with Uplight for flexibility management, customer engagement actually is the 1 + 1 + 1 that equals 10.
I want to talk more about this tiered structure that you mentioned, and then we'll talk about our fellow cephalopod Kraken as well in that National Grid partnership. This tiered structure that you mentioned, where they can get access to the Octopus app, where does this boundary stop? Does this include customer operations as well? So, for example, if Southern California Edison is my utility and I call them, will I be speaking to somebody from Octopus's call center, or will I be speaking to the utility itself?
Well, today, Uplight does operate some customer service capabilities. So if you are calling about a specific program that Uplight is managing, you might actually engage with an Uplight customer service representative. But no, I mean, the core customer operations of a utility like Southern California Edison or any of the Uplight utilities won't change, right? I mean, that is a relationship that is well established, and that is a relationship utilities want to maintain. I think it's more the digital experiences that customers may have access to, particularly oriented around flexibility. And so that is a major entry point for Uplight today. And we think it's a major area of partnership and collaboration between Uplight and Octopus going forward, is to really enhance that digital experience and move from providing event-based demand response or event-based flexibility management, which is what most utilities do today. When I say event-based, it's I have a smart thermostat. It is enrolled in my utility program, and then some numbers of days over the course of the summer, the utility can call on that thermostat and it will reduce load. We really view the future as a world where that thermostat is able to interact with the tariff every single day in small ways. So in ways that don't diminish comfort, in ways that don't diminish consumer utility of your electric vehicle, But in concert, when that EV and that thermostat and other devices in your home are doing small little changes in concert every single day, that is going to reduce costs. And that gets to what the core demand, core need of the customer is, which is, how do I lower my bill? Lowering that bill improves satisfaction. It also improves the likelihood that a consumer is going to want to allow their device to participate in an event-based program. And event-based programs are where a lot of the value can be because, gosh, it's when the prices are really high or there's a network failure and you need to be able to rely on lots and lots of devices to respond in that moment. You want people to be bought into doing it. And we feel strongly that part of that buy-in is to expand the value of flexibility beyond just payments for events to continuous optimization and continuous savings.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, my understanding of the US market is that it's been kind of difficult to have participation rates on the customer side for this kind of distributed energy resource, signing up my smart thermostat or my EV or my battery. But I know Octopus has been able to have really high participation rates in the UK. Now, I'm not somebody who's participated in this kind of program before. Can you walk me through what it is about the customer experience that Octopus offers that's so different from what currently exists in the market today and how you're able to achieve participation rates that are so much higher?
I think there's two core bits. One is ease of use. It's just really simple to participate in an Octopus tariff. You have the app already. It's a 30-second journey from deciding you want to sign up to being able to execute the sign up. The other bit that's really significant is how we think about characterizing the benefits. All of our flexibility initiatives are tied to direct consumer savings. So you sign up for Agile, which is one of our flexibility rates, and what you're getting is 75% off the cost of charging your electric vehicle if you're allowing Octopus to have some control over when and how that vehicle charges between when you plug it in and in the morning when you want to get up and go to work or take your kids to school or what have you. And so because we link the benefits of flexibility to the units of measurement that people care about, how much money am I paying on my bill? And we make it really easy, and we create a single location, a single experience to connect every device, we reduce massively the friction associated with participation. Contrast that with the typical experience that a utility offers as a result of the regulatory programs that they have been mandated to implement. And I say that because I actually don't think this is a utility program design issue so much as a regulatory design issue. Flexibility programs in the US have come up as demand-side management programs mandated by public utilities commissions. And they have typically done so in a very siloed way. I have a thermostat program. I have an electric vehicle program. I have a battery program. I have a heat pump program. A consumer that maybe has multiple potential devices that can participate, they have to navigate multiple apps, multiple logins, and there's very little connectivity from a consumer perspective, at least, between all of these opportunities. And so a consumer may have to say, all right, I have an app for my thermostat, I have an app for my EV charger, I have an app for my battery, I have an app for my heat pump, I have an app for lighting, I have a utility app, and I have to go in and individually sort of create set points and do an individual enrollments across each one of those apps. And in some cases, actually, you have a prohibition. If I have a thermostat that's participating in a flexibility program, I'm now prohibited from participating in any of my other assets in other flexibility programs. So what you end up with is a bit of a spaghetti stew of mixed and mingled wires around how these programs work, and the result is low participation rates. Typically, a consumer flexibility program that requires consumer opt-in, you see less than 5% of consumers who participate. For flexibility programs where it's device-based, so the device may automatically be enrolled, say rush hour rewards is a famous one associated with Nest thermostats, even there, you're only seeing 25% participation rates. At Octopus, we're seeing 50, 60, 70% participation rates, say, of our electric vehicle drivers. If you drive an electric vehicle and you're an Octopus customer, 60% of those customers enroll in our flexibility management programs. Again, it's because we make it so easy and it's so clear what the benefits are.
Yeah, it sounds like you're making it easy for customers to save money. Through this Uplight partnership, then, I would imagine that all of the utilities that Uplight is currently serving would be pretty excited to get on board with an Octopus app if you're able to, deliver such excellent results. I guess my question would be, what are the different levels of engagement with Octopus that a utility can choose from, and what do you think will drive their decision on that?
It's a great question. Some of that has to be market tested. We have a theory that I have articulated here. Once we get into it with utilities and with Uplight, what exactly the nature of that engagement is going to be, I think we will find out. But our theory is that in a world where rates are going up, where there's a lot of stress on bills, there's a lot of media coverage around sort of the stress on the system, we are seeing utilities and regulators wanting to engage differently with consumers. And so the question is going to be, how do we meet utilities where they are, right? It's not going to be simply bringing the Octopus app with all of the great Constantine branding, saying, hey, give this to your customers. It's going to be much more of a back and forth around how do we maintain the experience that we know works and aspects of the branding we know are really compelling, but also marry that with the relationships that the utilities have established with their customers and the brands that they've built. And these are brands that have been around in some cases for 100+ years, have a really, really high awareness amongst the customer base. And that's important. I think that's actually the second bit that I want to highlight around flexibility. One of the reasons we've been able to have so much success engaging with our customers around flexibility is because we've built trust with our customers. And part of the way you build trust with your customers is you don't start with the first interaction you have saying, hey, connect your EV, connect your heat pump, connect your thermostat. No, you establish a relationship and you establish a cadence of providing great service. And when somebody has a question about their bill or somebody is having an issue with affordability, being there for them. And then you know what happens after you have a series of those interactions and you've worked with them for months or years? And then you go to them and you say, hey, would you like to save more money by connecting that device that you have? Or would you like to buy a device from us? It's just a much easier interaction to have. And I do think that actually is part of the challenge that we face here in the US is that so many flexibility programs, while they are offered through the utility, are implemented by third parties who have not established that trustful relationship with the consumer. And so a consumer, when they're thinking about enrolling in a virtual power plant, it might be a virtual power plant aggregator that they've never heard of. And they're like, well, I don't know that I really trust a company I've never heard of to control my thermostat, the comfort of my home. But they might be more willing to do so if it's through the utility. And so I think that that's a starting point. But we also know that utilities in the US have not had to, by and large, operate as true consumer companies. They care about their customers, but they're not thinking about their customer as someone I have to acquire and retain, because that's just not the model, right? That, you're a PG&E customer. I live in Northern California. I'm a PG&E customer. I can't go out and choose to be the customer of someone else. We have community choice aggregators here, so I can choose between my community choice aggregator and PG&E. But those are my only two choices. And so that's what I'm going to do. I don't have the ability to go out and say, well, I want to choose from this provider or this provider or this provider based on any range of offerings they may have.
I think you pointed out something that is quite interesting in terms of what I would maybe chalk up to a cultural difference, also like a systemic difference with the way that utilities function in the US being a monopoly. They care about their customers, but the customer usually doesn't have a choice. Have you noticed anything else on the cultural side of things with the customers, like a willingness to sign up for, like you said, the control of a thermostat? I know that there's the trust with the utility, but is there also maybe just a hesitancy with the American mindset or anything?
Octopus serves customers in Texas. We also serve customers in Tokyo. We also serve customers in Turin. So I think we have a pretty good sense of the different behaviors and mindsets of electricity consumers in pretty different parts of the world. And by and large, what we find is there's more similarities than differences. Customers want to be treated fairly. They want to feel like they have an opportunity to have some control over their costs. And first and foremost, though, they want to be comfortable. And when you focus on those three things, customers will engage with you kind of irrespective of the cultural context.
Well, that's good news for you guys coming in, having so much different market experience. I liked the 3T examples that you gave, Tokyo, Turin, Texas. That's good. So maybe we can jump back to Kraken, because I know that has now been spun out as a different company. But in the press release that came out with this collaboration, with this investment that Octopus has made in Uplight, it also said that Kraken will begin exploring collaboration with Uplight. And that caught my attention because both platforms do distributed energy resource management and customer engagement. And I was wondering if you could walk us through the technical roadmap, how these platforms could fit together. Would it be an integration, a migration, or running parallel systems?
Yeah, so look, I'm not the person to give you an in-depth technical roadmap of any product, let alone these products. So I'll refrain from doing that. But let me sort of speak to what we think the industrial logic is. Kraken and Uplight are extremely complementary solutions. Narrow areas where there may be some overlap, but they're really complementary solutions. What is Kraken at its core? It is a CIS CRM system that competes with solutions like Oracle, SAP, or Salesforce. It's the core customer operations system for an energy company. Billing, customer service. Now, what Kraken has built, which is so unique, though, is a whole other set of additional capabilities that, when integrated, become more powerful. Those integrated capabilities are generation flexibility management. So actually being able to have a single system where you do everything from metering your customer and setting rates for your customers to managing large-scale generation assets like wind, solar, and storage. It does have a flexibility management module, so connecting those hundreds of thousands or millions of devices that Octopus has connected and is actively managing across our customers' homes, managed in Kraken and managed in an integrated fashion within our billing system. And so that is the core of what Kraken is, though, right? It is a full end-to-end solution, vertical technology, replacing the bits and pieces of horizontal and vertical technology that energy companies will have today. So today, a utility may have an SAP CIS system, a separate system for their call center, a separate system for generation management, a separate system for flexibility management. And that seems like it's only four. It's certainly way more systems than that. With Kraken, you actually have the ability to take out 5, 10, 15 systems and replace it with a single integrated cloud-based solution. And that is not what Uplight does. Uplight is a system that is designed to interact with the existing CIS system, extract information, create insights around that customer's energy usage, facilitate communication with that customer around their energy consumption, and then allow for that customer to enroll devices in their home into utility flexibility management programs and run optimization. And so as you can imagine, like the starting point can be a utility working with Uplight. But if a utility wants to drive a much deeper level of transformation, actually where they want to go is they want to think about how Kraken can replace all of those systems that are, in essence, sort of holding them back from operating as a 21st century flexibility first utility and implementing Kraken in that way. And so we see Uplight and Kraken being extremely complementary as places on the journey of a utility in their technology stack.
National Grid already has this partnership in place with Kraken where they're doing this migration of their whole back end onto the Kraken system. And I know that now Kraken is a separate company, so I won't ask you too much detail about that. But for the specific example of National Grid, how does Uplight then fit into that technology stack for a customer like National Grid?
So today, Uplight is not a provider to National Grid. So there's not a specific connectivity issue at the moment. I think the exploration is this, right? Uplight has established this position in North America as a leading provider of a whole suite of services, has a lot of know-how, has a lot of customer engagement, has a lot of relationships with the hardware manufacturers. On the other side of closing this transaction, one of the things we're going to want to explore is how can Octopus and how can Uplight and Octopus help Kraken and National Grid solve the problems that they have. I think that's going to be an exploration that we go through, but I don't have a specific answer today for, it's going to be this or it's going to be that. I think we really have to get into it to sort of say, how do we solve the problem? And the problem statement is this. The demand stack is a massively underutilized opportunity to lower costs, create headroom on the grid for new load to be connected, manage intermittent renewables, and enhance reliability. But we're not doing as good of a job as we need to in leveraging the demand stack, engaging with consumers, connecting those devices, operating those devices to make flexibility a core strategy for a utility, as opposed to sort of sitting out there in the sort of the niche area of customer programs.
I can imagine that flexibility is of the utmost importance for any utility at the moment, considering all of the large load announcements that have been made regarding the data centers in the US. And your announcement specifically mentions helping utilities manage AI-driven data center demand. Can you walk me through that connection? How is it that residential flexibility can help with the challenges that utilities are facing, will continue to face around data center interconnection and load growth?
We think there's a lot of opportunity there. It's an opportunity set that has been not fully explored, but let me give you a couple examples. So Virginia, right now, there's a lot of community pushback, particularly in Loudoun County, against data centers. And a lot of it's being characterized as data centers are causing rates to go up. Deploying flexibility, as I've said earlier, is one of the most effective strategies we have available to us, in the short run at least, to help lower customer bills. Being able to really lean into customer flexibility, be it connecting the devices customers already have, or actually deploying new things like batteries into homes in somewhere like Loudoun County. And being able to characterize this as yes, these large loads are coming. And as part of these large loads coming and part of the investment they're making investments in empowering you, consumer, to take control over your energy bill and lower your rates. So there's that opportunity, which is more of a cause and effect than a direct relationship. So that's one. The second is we're seeing with Bring Your Own Capacity, which is an emergent tool that large loads are starting to consider, whereby flexibility providers will create net new capacity in markets like PJM and then make that net new capacity available to a large load so it can fulfill its obligations to the market. Well, that has started with a focus on large commercial, but no reason why residential doesn't have a really important role to play in Bring Your Own Capacity. And again, there's the added benefit. Every time you engage with a residential consumer to participate in a Bring Your Own Capacity framework, you're lowering their bill. You're putting money in their pocket. They're going to be in a better position from an affordability perspective. So it creates a win-win there. The really big opportunity from my perspective is how do you get to a place where utilities are comfortable changing their distribution and transmission planning behavior to account for permanent load reductions that flexibility can provide. And in so doing, get comfortable with the idea that if I have tens of thousands of homes that are participating in a flexibility program, maybe it's because they've all connected their thermostats, and I can statistically be confident that during the highest load, 50, 100, 250 hours a summer, those thermostats are going to respond. Or because we're putting batteries in homes and creating a permanent shift in the load factors from those homes, I then can get confident in connecting a 500 megawatt data center at a 400 megawatt point of interconnection, because that incremental 100 megawatts is not driven by the totality of the mismatch between supply and demand, but it's a few hundred hours a year where supply and demand are mismatched that load flexibility can operate against. I think the other really important thing to think about is there's a lot of conversation today about data centers themselves being flexible, which is hugely important. We need to be able to have confidence that when there is a reliability event, when there is a high price event, that the data centers can physically ramp down so as not to cause overwhelmingly negative effects within the network or within a market. It is also true that those data centers have heavy incentive to continue to operate at full load because of the differential between the revenue they can generate and the cost of electricity. So we think there's actually a huge opportunity for load flexibility to create that win-win, whereby, in many hours when you might want the data center to ramp down, why not instead pay consumers to initiate flexibility in their loads, lower their bills without really affecting comfort or utility, and you allow the data center to operate in a more economically optimal fashion. So they win, consumers win. What's not to like?
I would have to agree. I guess my only question off of the back of that would be, when do you think that would be feasible? Because that's a lot of spinning plates to control all at the same time.
All the stuff is moving very fast, right? Let's take a really interesting example of a model akin to this. And it's what's happening in Minnesota with Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy is deploying larger scale batteries at commercial industrial sites to mitigate the demands from large data centers. And we're hearing about this really only over the last couple months. But I can guarantee you that this has been in the works for a while, right? These things have to go through regulatory proceedings. And I think that's where we are right now here too, right? It's a lot is happening, but the utilities can't make the announcements. They can't implement these changes until they have the approval of their regulators. And those processes can take years. So I think while there's a lot happening behind the scenes and there's a lot of work that's being done, it's still a little bit of time away from the formal stamp of approval. You shall be able to go and do this. And you're going to see the announcements of companies like ours partnering with utilities and large loads to actually implement complementary residential load flexibility and large load connection.
And I think you've shared that this is moving very fast with this partnership. You really have to start getting into the weeds first before you can draw any conclusions. But if you had to say, looking out 18 months, 24 months, what do you think success looks like through this partnership? What should people be watching for?
Success of this partnership is first and foremost going to be measured in how many customers are we helping lower their bills. That to me is the single most significant unit of measurement. To the degree that we can establish that flexibility is the best way, most effective way, fastest way to deal with the affordability crisis, that's going to give us an opportunity to scale massively because we're solving the single most significant problem that consumers have. It's the single biggest concern that often regulators have. And if it's a consumer problem and it's a regulator problem, it is a utility problem.
So you guys can't be the only octopus in the sea, as they would say. Is there any competition that you see elsewhere on the market that has this, what at least sounds like to me, a very unique position where you're a customer-centric, technology-driven company that just so happens to work in the electricity retail space? I mean, are there other octopus in the sea, or do you really feel like you guys are the only one out there?
We're definitely not the only one out there. There are great companies that are working at many levels in the space. For instance, we have great admiration for Zach and the team at Base Power. They're really looking at how do you start with the consumer, create a wonderful consumer experience, solve a real problem, but also deploy a heck of a lot of flexibility. So we think a company like that is doing great things, a slightly different approach than what we have, but a great company. And they're more of a new market entrant. Then you have companies like Energy Hub that have been at it a long time, but are doing great work. Look, this is a rising tide, and we need a lot of different folks in the sea, big and small, who are making great progress here. Because without that, without competition, without multiple, when we push each other to be better, and we help push our utilities and we help push regulators, frankly. And that's the biggest one, I would say. We need to all work together to change the mindset of the regulatory framework and the regulators, to push them to say we have to do things differently. We have to empower utilities to innovate and not hold them back by saying, well, we're going to wait 3 years while we test this and come back and forth. Things are moving too quickly. By the time a utility files an application to try something and it goes through the 18 months or 24 months of approvals, the thing they wanted to try may be obsolete because a new tech, a new approach, a new solution has come in and replaced it. So we have to massively shorten that cycle time for regulatory consideration or approval to empower utilities to do things differently, work with companies like Octopus, work with companies like Uplight, and try things, see what works, and double down when it does.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that it seems to me that Octopus is trying a couple different things in the US, given the market that you've come into here and the difference on a state level. You have these retail operations in Texas. You're providing this flexibility as a service, and now you have Uplight. Are you pursuing both direct to consumer and utility partnerships as parallel strategies, or do you think you'll find one primary path forward and the other one is a bit of a stepping stone?
So these are going to operate as fully distinct businesses, right? Uplight is majority owned by Octopus, but it's Octopus and Schneider who are the two partners. Uplight is a standalone business. Our retail business, Octopus Energy, is wholly owned by Octopus and is a fully distinct strategy and go-to-market from Uplight. But there is absolutely industrial logic between having the two under the umbrella of Octopus Energy US. Direct-to-consumer gives us an understanding of how and when you engage with customers around flexibility. What are the things they want? What are the things they don't want? That gives us really powerful insight to be able to work on the Uplight side of the house, engaging directly with utilities and say, hey, utility, this is what we're seeing in the retail business. This is working. This isn't working. How can we help implement the things that are working at scale to get to where they want to go?
And so today we've spoken quite a bit about Octopus itself, this partnership, maybe the future of data centers, the future of regulatory change that could come about. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with as a final thought?
There's a lot happening today in U.S. electricity. It is now more front and center for consumers than ever before. The cost of electricity actually is something that is now a tier 1 expense that people are worried about. But we're also at a time when we've never had more opportunity to do something about it. We've never had more opportunity to empower consumers and improve their comfort, improve their lives. The reality is this: electrification of transportation, of cooking, of heating isn't just clean, it's better. Driving an EV is just a better experience. They're better cars.
You've never tried a hydrogen car? That's probably them. I'm just kidding.
Oh, there you go. That's fair. It's also electric though, right? It's just a different form of electrification. That is what we're in the business of. We're in the business of better. To effectuate that, though, under this market construct, you have to work with utilities. You have to partner with utilities, help them deliver that better to their consumers. And we just now have a great opportunity to do it. I couldn't be more excited to deliver better to consumers across America through load flexibility and electrification.
Well, Nick, this has been incredibly clarifying and even uplifting. I think we've given listeners of the podcast a much clearer picture of what Octopus is building in the US, and how this Uplight acquisition fits in. Thank you very much for taking the time to walk us through the details.
Thank you so much for having me.
And listeners, thank you for lending us your ears. Feel free to join us again in 2 weeks and find the Interchange Recharged wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.